Hello everyone, and welcome back to Marriage is Not the End. Here, we take a close look at the comings and goings within marriage, and savor all the bittersweet flavors of love. Today's story comes from a viewer submission. She said it took her 6 full years to finally gather the courage to tell it. The story is long enough to drain a person of every ounce of love and hatred they've ever had. And yet it's also short enough to sum up in one sentence: from heart-fluttering love to utter despair, separated by 7 nights in the emergency room. Let's call our heroine Olivia, and the man in the story Jonathan. But this story doesn't begin with a romantic encounter. It begins with a messy ending. On the day their Cold War entered its 3rd month, Olivia ran into her husband Jonathan at Bergdorf Goodman on 5th Avenue in New York. Of course, he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was a young girl, carefully shielded behind him as if he were protecting her. She looked barely in her early 20s. There was still a hint of baby fat on her face, but her eyes were sharp and calculating. She stared at Olivia with a strange mix of defiance and fear. When Jonathan saw Olivia, his first reaction wasn't embarrassment or guilt. Instead, almost instinctively, he pulled the girl further behind him and said in a tone Olivia knew all too well, slightly impatient, "Olivia, if you're going to lose your temper, take it out on me. Don't bully the girl. She doesn't know anything. See that?" He didn't even bother explaining. He had already predicted her reaction: hysterical, screaming, maybe even violent. Just like every time in the past 5 years when she discovered one of his affairs. In his mind, she was the crazy woman, the jealous shrew who couldn't control her emotions. And he was the hero, bravely protecting an innocent girl. Watching the scene in front of her, Olivia suddenly found it a little funny. 3 months. For 3 entire months she hadn't called him once. Not a single message. During those months she stayed alone in her apartment late at night, taking every photo from the past 6 years out of their albums, one by one. She tore them up and threw them into the fireplace. As the flames swallowed those smiling faces, she thought she would cry. But she didn't. She simply watched quietly, while the fire that once burned so painfully in her heart slowly cooled, until nothing remained but ashes. So she didn't rush forward like Jonathan expected. No screaming. No grabbing. No drama. She simply looked at him calmly and said the line she had rehearsed in her mind countless times. "Jonathan, let's get a divorce. Honestly, you two look pretty good together." Then she turned and walked away. Her steps were steady, almost light. She didn't see Jonathan freeze behind her, nor did she hear the words that slipped out of his mouth instinctively. "Olivia, say that again and I'll jump off this building right now." She heard him. But she didn't turn around. She knew him too well. When he said jump, he didn't mean jumping off a building. He meant jumping down from the moral high ground he imagined himself standing on, diving straight back into the emotional trap of their endless arguments. And this time, she wasn't playing along. 3 days later, Olivia arrived at New York Presbyterian Hospital holding a large bouquet of white chrysanthemums. Don't get the wrong idea. She wasn't there to visit Jonathan. She was there to sign the discharge papers. After that encounter 3 days earlier, after she had calmly asked for a divorce, Jonathan, the man who was used to solving problems with anger and violence, stormed into her apartment that same night. They fought again. This time, Olivia didn't hold back. She was defending herself, but Jonathan's head still slammed into the corner of the coffee table. He ended up with 30 stitches. When Olivia pushed open the hospital room door, the scene inside was even more dramatic than she expected. The same girl Jonathan had been protecting in the department store was now leaning over his bed, crying her heart out. Through her sobs, she gently stroked Jonathan's bandaged head. "It was that old woman who hit you, right? How could she do that to you? Uncle Jonathan, why didn't you fight back? I'll avenge you. Anyone who hurts you, I'll fight them." She cried with heartbreaking innocence, nose red, tears falling one by one, like a fragile little white flower. Jonathan immediately pulled her into his arms, comforting her softly. "It's okay, baby. Don't cry. Uncle doesn't even feel it." Olivia stood at the doorway, expressionless, watching the performance. When their faces started getting closer and closer, lips almost touching, she finally lifted her foot. Bang! The door slammed open. Surprise! The flirtatious atmosphere shattered instantly. The girl who had just sworn revenge screamed and jumped off the bed, scrambling into the corner. Jonathan's arms closed around empty air as he leaned against the headboard and looked at Olivia with annoyance. "Olivia, if you're just here to sign papers, could you at least knock next time? Tara's timid. If you scare her like that, I'll have to comfort her all night. That's exhausting." As he spoke, he reached out and pulled the trembling girl, Tara, back onto the bed, his face full of indulgent affection. With Jonathan as backup, Tara suddenly became much braver. She noticed the bouquet of white chrysanthemums in Olivia's arms immediately. As if she'd caught Olivia red-handed, she snatched the flowers, threw them on the floor, and stomped on them. Who brings such unlucky flowers? You evil woman. Jonathan was hurt by you and you still dare show up? I curse you, you'll get hit by a car the moment you step outside. Olivia looked at the crushed chrysanthemums on the floor, then at Tara's twisted face. And she smiled. An opportunity delivered to your door shouldn't be wasted. She stepped forward, grabbed Tara's carefully styled ponytail, pulled her face close, smack. Then another. And another. Left and right, asterisk asterisk smack, smack, smack asterisk asterisk, 3 rounds in total. By the time she finished, Tara's delicate, pure and innocent makeup was ruined, her hair was a mess, and she clutched her face, wailing. Jonathan. She's bullying me. Olivia, that's enough. Jonathan finally snapped. While wiping Tara's tears with a tissue, he glared at Olivia. We agreed before, whatever issues we have as a couple, we deal with privately. No dragging third parties into it. I don't want to get physical. Just apologize to Tara and we'll forget this happened. Crash. Olivia didn't say a word. She simply lifted her high heel and kicked the chair beside the hospital bed to pieces. One of the chair legs flew across the room and slammed into the wall with a loud bang. Tara shrank deeper into Jonathan's arms. Olivia looked at Jonathan's hypocritical face and let out a cold laugh. Jonathan, did you forget how you ended up in the hospital? How did he end up here? That story starts with a vase. It happened last week. It was Tara's birthday, and for some reason she became obsessed with a vase sitting on the windowsill in Olivia's bedroom. That vase was the token of love Olivia and Jonathan had exchanged 6 years ago. Back then they were broke, living in a damp basement apartment in Brooklyn that leaked wind in the winter and rain in the summer. Jonathan saved 2 whole months of wages just to buy it from a roadside secondhand stall for $20. In those hardest days of their lives, it was the only thing that could truly be called a gift. Jonathan knew exactly what that vase meant to Olivia. And yet he still let Tara take it. His explanation? The girl gets jealous easily. Once she found out it was a love token between us, she insisted on smashing it herself to feel better. That day, Olivia ended her business trip early and rushed home with her suitcase in tow. She had planned to surprise Jonathan, because that day was their 6th wedding anniversary. Back in their hardest years, they had made a promise. No matter what happened in the future, as long as they were both still alive when this day came around, they would find each other and make up unconditionally. Holding on to that last shred of hope, Olivia took a 10-plus-hour red-eye flight back. But when she pushed open the door, the surprise waiting for her wasn't her husband. It was an empty windowsill. She stood there in a daze, still trying to process it, when Jonathan walked out of the bathroom. He looked at her, frowned as if thinking for a moment, and said casually, "Stop looking. I gave that vase to Tara." Olivia's hands trembled as she sat down on the couch and pulled out a cigarette and lighter. She tried again and again before finally asking hoarsely, "There are so many things in the walk-in closet. Why did you let her take that one?" "Oh, that?" Jonathan paused mid-motion while drying his hair and lazily lifted his eyelids. "The girl gets jealous easily. Once she found out it was the love token between you and me, she insisted on smashing it herself. Said she'd feel better that way." He watched Olivia struggle to light her cigarette, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't manage it. Then he deliberately mimicked her trembling and sneered. "Look at you. I've bought you so many Cartier and Van Cleef pieces over the years. Why make such a big deal out of a $20 vase?" Olivia stared at him, her chest rising and falling violently. She knew what was happening. Respiratory alkalosis a physical reaction caused by extreme anger and grief. After all these years together, Jonathan knew better than anyone how to push her buttons. But that day, he still wasn't satisfied. He pulled out his phone and started filming her. In a sickening tone, he said, "Baby, look at this, your sister-in-law's so mad she's about to lose her mind. Don't accuse me again tonight of touching, Jonathan, you son of a bitch." Before he could finish, Olivia grabbed the ashtray beside her and hurled it straight at his head. Jonathan, of course, didn't take it lying down. He'd trained in boxing since he was young and was far stronger than Olivia. He lunged forward, grabbed her by the throat, and slammed her into the couch, strangling her with all his strength. If Jonathan's secretary hadn't arrived with an ambulance in time, breaking down the door and pulling them apart, the two of them might have killed each other that night. Fortunately, Olivia escaped with only a ring of bruises around her neck where blood vessels had burst. Jonathan wasn't so lucky. The ashtray gave him a concussion, and the back of his head split open badly. He needed 30 stitches, and he couldn't even lie flat when sleeping. Olivia had originally had no intention of visiting him. But that day, her assistant discovered something. Tara had once bribed reporters to wait outside Olivia's company building, hoping to photograph her losing control. Ever since she hooked up with Jonathan, Tara hadn't missed a single chance to show off. At first she would secretly stuff her underwear into the passenger seat of Jonathan's car, just so Olivia would find it. Later, she escalated to sending Olivia photos of herself and Jonathan in bed. The newest one popped up on Olivia's phone the same day Jonathan's secretary came asking her to go to the hospital to sign discharge papers. In the photo, Tara lay beneath Jonathan, staring into the camera with a provocative smile. Olivia looked at the face on the screen for a few seconds. Then she smiled faintly, slammed her foot on the accelerator, and drove straight to the hospital. Yes, she did go there to sign the discharge papers. But teaching the arrogant mistress a lesson along the way felt perfectly reasonable. Unfortunately, she didn't get the chance to add another injury to Jonathan that day. The commotion in the room was too loud and drew the nurses in. Apologizing was out of the question. Not causing trouble for the medical staff was already Olivia's limit. She signed the papers and left. The VIP ward of the international department, combined with the scandalous aura of an extramarital affair, meant almost everyone along the hallway gave her curious looks. While waiting for the elevator, she heard whispers behind her. Isn't it only been 2 months? Why is Mrs. Jonathan back at the hospital again? What else? Rich people's dirty drama. Every time they argue, they end up fighting. They're practically regulars here. Ha! Look at her trying to act tough. Jonathan's already bringing his mistress right into the hospital room. What's the point of showing up just to assert her position as the wife? Don't say that. I actually followed their wedding back then. They were so sweet it was almost sickening. I have no idea how things ended up like this. Olivia lowered her gaze. Her fingers dug deeply into her palms. 6 years ago, Olivia and Jonathan's wedding had made the newspapers. The ceremony took place at a private estate on Long Island, where tens of thousands of tulips flown in from the Netherlands covered the entire lawn. The extravagance was so over the top that the media criticized it as wasteful. But no one knew the truth. Jonathan had stubbornly refused to let the wedding planners handle everything. He flew to the estate himself to pick every detail personally. From the font on the invitations, to the patterns on the plates, to the way the satin ribbons were tied on each guest chair, he insisted on approving everything To outsiders, it was just another lavish marriage between two wealthy lovers. Few people knew how much Olivia and Jonathan had gone through to get there. They both came from respectable families and grew up on Manhattan's Upper East Side, practically childhood sweethearts. But Olivia only discovered at 18 that she was adopted. And Jonathan had always been the illegitimate son no one wanted to acknowledge. In a circle like theirs, love was never something you could control. When Olivia was 20, her family tried to send her to a business partner with disturbing fetishes, as a gift to secure a deal. That night, Jonathan stormed in and rescued her, risking being beaten to death by the man's bodyguards. He nearly lost his life. 1 leg was broken, and 3 ribs were fractured. He voluntarily gave up the tiny inheritance he had left, and only then did his family reluctantly step in to save them. But that was all they did. To avoid trouble, both families cut ties with them completely and kicked them out. Once their financial support vanished, even survival became difficult. During the worst winter, they lived in a leaking basement in Queens. Jonathan's leg injury was so severe he couldn't sleep without painkillers. Olivia couldn't bear to see him suffer, so she worked 4 jobs a day. During the day she wore a mascot costume in Times Square, dancing and handing out flyers. At night she shook drinks at Starbucks, then went out driving as a designated driver. Some of those jobs included staff meals. She would eat only a few bites of plain rice and pack up the meat and vegetables to bring back to Jonathan. They thought life would continue like that forever. Until Olivia was hit by a drunk driver. To avoid legal trouble, the driver paid her $50,000. Around that time cross-border e-commerce was starting to boom. With that money they moved out of the basement and rented a tiny studio in Long Island City, starting their own business. Jonathan had a natural head for business. Olivia spoke fluent English. Together they worked as a team, beginning by reselling small Chinese goods on eBay. To their surprise, the orders kept increasing. Later they founded their own company and created their own brand. Then Jonathan's biological father, the old man who controlled a media empire, died. Jonathan was summoned back into the family. It took him 3 years of ruthless battles, but he finally reclaimed everything that had originally been his. At 25, he rented every LED screen in Times Square, set off fireworks for an entire month, and publicly announced their wedding. In front of countless witnesses, he lifted her veil. His eyes were red with tears, his voice choked with emotion. "Olivia, in this lifetime, I'll never have the strength to love anyone but you. Vows are always beautiful. Reality, however, has no mercy." No one expected that on their 6th anniversary, the man who casually gave away their love token vase would be Jonathan himself. Ding! The elevator arrived. Olivia wiped the corner of her eyes and walked out calmly. She drove back to their home on the Upper East Side. The moment she stepped through the door, her phone started vibrating non-stop. The messages were from Jonathan's secretary. The gist was simple. Jonathan was taking Tara away for a vacation to relax, and he wouldn't be staying at the villa for a while. Before Olivia could reply, another message arrived, a screenshot of a $20 million check, along with a location tag. Olivia replied with a single. The secretary answered politely. "Mr. Jonathan said Miss Tara has been upset lately and doesn't wish to see you for the time being. He hopes that even if you travel to Europe, you'll try to avoid running into her." Olivia glanced at the location. Her heart slowly sank. Anse Chastanet, St. Lucia. One of the most romantic resorts in the Caribbean. Legend has it that under the moonlight there, the waves bear witness to lovers' vows, ensuring they stay together forever. Back when their company had just been founded, Jonathan proposed to her here. Over the years, Jonathan had gone through more mistresses than Olivia could count on two hands. But even at his worst, when he was behaving the most outrageously, not a single one of those women had ever been brought to St. Lucia. Olivia stood there holding her phone for a moment, then walked over to the couch and sat down. With practiced ease, she lit herself a cigarette. As the cool mint smoke mixed with the chilly air and filled her lungs, even her heart seemed to ache with a sharp, prickling pain. The smoke rings spread like mist, and along with them came wave after wave of bitter memories. The first time she found out Jonathan was cheating, she had bought herself a pack of cigarettes for the first time in her life. Because she didn't know how to smoke, she started coughing violently after just one drag. Covering her mouth, she collapsed onto the bed, staring at the photos the private investigator had sent her, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't understand it. They had just landed a huge international deal, so why had Jonathan suddenly become like a different person? Taking things lying down had never been her style. Even back when her family had tried to force her into that arranged marriage, if Jonathan hadn't shown up, she still would have fought back with the knife she had hidden in her clothes, even if it meant killing or being killed. So she confronted him. She demanded answers. She even convinced herself in advance that maybe, just maybe, he had some reason she didn't know about. What she never expected was that Jonathan would admit it so openly. That day was the first time they got physical. In the middle of the fight, the thick stack of photos she threw at him sliced open his forehead, and blood immediately poured down half his face. Her first instinct was to call 911, but Jonathan grabbed her hand and pressed it hard against his own brow bone. "Go ahead. Hit me right here. Girls these days love a scar through the eyebrow anyway." After that, Jonathan became even more brazen. At some point, ending up in the hospital had become almost normal for the two of them. Some of their friends couldn't stand to watch anymore and tried to talk sense into her. "If he's seeing other people, then you should too. You each do your own thing. That's better than destroying each other." But she wasn't him. She couldn't bring herself to roll around in the marital bed with a lover. Deep down, she still held on to a sense of loyalty to family. It wasn't about pride or stubbornness. She simply could not force herself to cross that moral line. By the time she realized she had finished the cigarette, it was completely dark outside. She scrolled through social media absent-mindedly, when suddenly she came across a travel blogger's live stream. For some reason she couldn't explain, she tapped on it. The screen showed that very beach in St. Lucia. When the first shooting star streaked across the sky, the tourists around the camera burst into excited cries. As the blogger mentioned the local romantic legend, people everywhere closed their eyes and made wishes. Then suddenly, a girl's voice, far too excited, cut through the commentary and stabbed straight into Olivia's ears. "My wish is that Uncle Jonathan keeps every promise he made to me." At the edge of the frame, a familiar figure was caught on camera by accident. On the screen, Tara wore a sweet smile as she shamelessly flirted with the man across from her. "For example, tomorrow you're taking me diving, the day after that you're coming with me to buy that Hermes bag I wanted, and the day after that," she paused, grinning. "Anyway, just keep being this good to me forever. And don't ever get tired of me." She sniffled, then added, "Oh, and most importantly, I wish that old witch who's always bullying Uncle Jonathan would disappear completely, so we can finally be together openly." The moment she finished, she tilted her head up and looked at Jonathan with bright, expectant eyes. Before he could even respond, she suddenly sneezed. "You silly girl. I told you it would get cold tonight." Olivia watched Jonathan sigh, take off his coat, and drape it over Tara's shoulders. "You insisted on dressing like that just to look cute. You're going to catch a cold again." "Oh, please, that's only because you gave it to me." Tara rose onto her tiptoes, grabbed his collar, and looked at him with a sly smile. "I may have only graduated recently, but don't think I don't know what it means when a man gives a girl a dress. It means he wants to personally." Jonathan didn't let her finish. He simply lowered his head and kissed her. Under the deep night sky, shooting stars poured down like a waterfall. Beneath that glittering heaven, they kissed passionately. It should have been a beautiful scene. But to Olivia, it was unbearable to look at. The antique clock on the wall chimed 12 times. Olivia turned off the live stream and got up to wash up for bed. The moment her bare foot touched the carpet, a sharp pain shot through her soul. She bent down to look and realized it was a shard of glass left behind from the ashtray that had shattered during their last fight. The cut in her foot throbbed steadily. Leaning against the wall, she found tweezers and rubbing alcohol in the first aid kit. Expressionless, she dug out the piece of glass embedded in her flesh. Over the years, she had become very good at treating her own wounds. The spotlights in the living room were still bright, and the blood-stained shard glimmered beautifully in the light. She stared at it for a long while. Suddenly, it struck her that what she and Jonathan had was just like that shattered ashtray. After the burst of anger had passed, all that remained was a floor full of wreckage. Everyone watching from the outside assumed that the reason she had kept trying, over and over again, to piece it back together was because she couldn't bear to let go of the billions of dollars she and Jonathan had built together. But that wasn't the truth. She had simply been stubbornly waiting for an answer. She wanted to ask Jonathan herself. They had known each other for 15 years. They had been married for 6. They had shared so many unforgettable memories. They had spent all those years trying to walk the same road. So why was it that, instead of growing closer, they had only drifted farther and farther apart? But the truth was clear now. No matter how pretty a shard of glass might look, at the end of the day, it was still just a shard of glass. If you keep clinging to a pile of broken pieces that can never truly be put back together, all you do is trap yourself in place. In the end, you'll only cut yourself to pieces, until both sides lose. At 7:00 a.m., Olivia woke before her alarm went off. She hadn't slept well. Half dreaming, half awake, the images that ran through her mind had shifted between sweetness and heartbreak. But every single one of them had one thing in common. They were all memories of her life with Jonathan. Rubbing her tired eyes, she picked up her phone. New social media updates kept popping up one after another. At 2:00 a.m., Tara had posted a set of couple selfies. "Ran away with the person I love most to the Milky Way at Jonathan. Let's spend the next 10 years together too." Most of the pictures were just Tara wrapping herself around Jonathan and posing by herself. In some of the candid shots, even their faces were blurry. But even in those brief, frozen moments, Olivia could still clearly see the tenderness in Jonathan's expression, completely unguarded, completely real. Jonathan had liked the post. And when she saw the special contact name under it, she realized that at some point he had changed his profile picture to match Tara's, a couple avatar of 2 pink Peppa Pigs hugging stuffed animals. It looked ugly, childish, even. But in a way, it was perfectly in line with how Jonathan had always been when he was in love. Olivia silently scrolled on, realizing that maybe this time, Jonathan was serious. There was a knock at the front door downstairs. Jonathan's assistant sent another message. "Miss Tara suddenly came down with a high fever last night and said that once she returns, she wants to move into the villa. Mr. Jonathan has agreed. He has already purchased a batch of furniture according to Miss Tara's preferences, so could you please open the door and sign for the delivery? Also, as compensation, he has offered to transfer another 20% of the company's shares to you. He also said that if you refuse, the offer can be increased." Back when they first started the company, Olivia's share had already been larger than Jonathan's. With this additional 20%, it would be almost equivalent to transferring the entire company into her name. This had always been Jonathan's way of making it up to her. Over the years, his compensation had taken many forms, from an emerald necklace bought at auction, to a penthouse duplex overlooking Central Park, and now yet another transfer of shares. But Olivia was not some pampered canary raised in a gilded cage. By the time she had climbed to where she was now, whether it was money or power, this kind of gesture, this kind of concession disguised as generosity, no longer held any surprise for her at all. She put on a coat and went downstairs to open the door for the delivery workers. Boxes, some nearly waist-high, were carried in one after another. Before long, the living room was filled with pink furniture, bright and conspicuous against the elegant decor. Leaning against the railing, Olivia watched the workers moving back and forth. For a moment, her mind drifted back to when she and Jonathan had first bought this villa. They had been so excited then, debating what color to paint the walls, choosing the Italian sofa for the living room, even arguing happily over which decorative pieces should sit on the dining table. Back then there wasn't even a chandelier yet. They would sit together under the moonlight streaming through the windows, staring into each other's eyes and imagining the future. In the dim light of memory, Jonathan's smiling eyes overlapped with the version of him from Tara's social media post yesterday. Familiar, yet strangely new. That thought she had buried deep in her heart resurfaced again, circling back no matter how hard she tried to suppress it. She couldn't bear the thought of this house, filled with so many of their memories, being marked everywhere by another woman's presence. But she also couldn't bring herself to destroy something she had poured so much effort into. Then she remembered the detached house she owned that had been sitting empty for years. Taking out her phone, she sent her assistant a message, "Schedule a moving company for me. As soon as possible." Within a week, Olivia had settled into her new place. Coincidentally, the company had just finished its Q1 financial settlement. After assigning the tasks that needed to be handled in the coming weeks, she decided to give herself a long vacation. Soon she was boarding a flight to Iceland. The transatlantic route was always long. By the time she woke again, the view outside had changed completely. The snow-covered mountains around Iceland's blue lagoon lay quietly in the distance, as if opening their arms to welcome her. Before the daylight faded, she took a cable car up to the mountaintop. According to the news, during winter the sun barely rises above the horizon here, creating a brief blue hour unlike anywhere else. She bought a cup of coffee at a wooden cabin and sat on a nearby bench, quietly waiting. When the company had first been founded, she and Jonathan had actually made a long list of places they wanted to travel to together. They had even printed out a huge world map and pinned it onto a corkboard, marking destinations and planning routes. But as the business grew bigger and bigger, and as Jonathan became increasingly busy dealing with family affairs, those travel plans were postponed again and again. Looking back now, maybe he hadn't really been that busy after all. Otherwise, how could he have taken Tara to the Caribbean, with stitches still in his head, just because she felt a little wronged? Night slowly fell. Before she realized it, everything around her had been washed in a soft blue-gray glow. She took out her camera to capture the moment. Then suddenly she heard excited voices from a group of tourists nearby. "Oh my God, it's the Northern Lights." Almost instantly, a faint streak of green appeared across the sky. Then more followed. Brighter and brighter. The aurora rippled like silk caught in the wind, flowing and twisting through the heavens, even casting a cold glow over the distant glaciers. Olivia tilted her head back, staring in amazement. Her excitement made her hands tremble as she pressed the shutter. The Northern Lights in Iceland were famously unpredictable. Even during the peak winter season, people could wait all night and see nothing. To stumble upon such a strong display by chance was a rare gift. Back at the hotel, she began reviewing the photos she had taken. While sorting through them, she casually picked one and posted it on Instagram. "Lucky night, caught the lights." 1 minute later, 2 new updates appeared almost simultaneously. The first was a new post from Tara. It was another set of couple photos, still taken on the St. Lucia beach. This time they had changed outfits, and the photography looked far more professional. The caption read, "Caught a cold, but Jonathan's kisses make everything better. He even came out to shoot couple photos with me just to cheer me up and make me take my medicine. Unlike some people who can only secretly steal photos from the internet. Hehe, can't wait to see them furious when we get back to New York." Steal photos. Was she talking about Olivia? Olivia tugged at the corner of her mouth and kept scrolling. Then she noticed something surprising. Jonathan, who hadn't posted on Instagram in ages, had reposted the same photos, adding 2 red heart emojis side by side. A few seconds later, he pinned the post to the top of his page. Olivia stared at those 2 bright red hearts for a moment. Then she exited the page without expression. After all, the world held countless breathtaking sights. The shooting stars of St. Lucia were not the only ones. And a relationship that had become unrecognizable didn't have just one possible ending. On her connecting flight to New Zealand, Olivia took the time to consult several lawyer friends about the division of assets between her and Jonathan. On this matter, she approached it the same way she did business. Anything that wasn't hers, she would never try to claim through dirty tricks. But anything that rightfully belonged to her, she would never give up for free. Besides, the assets under her and Jonathan's names were enormous. Just sorting through them would take at least a month. Now that her mind was clear and her decision made, it was better to prepare early. When her best friend Jane heard the news, she sent a message filled with exclamation marks. "My God, thank heavens. You're finally ready to let go of that bastard." Olivia smiled. "I just don't want to make things harder for myself anymore." Over the years, whether it was love or hatred, she had already wasted too much time on Jonathan. Having your emotions constantly tied to one person was exhausting. Whatever answer she had once been so desperate to find, it no longer mattered. Compared to continuing to struggle with him, there were far more things in life worth spending her energy on. Mount Cook in New Zealand truly lived up to its reputation as a playground for adults. In the following weeks, with a local guide leading the way, Olivia tried almost every adrenaline-filled outdoor activity imaginable: skydiving, jet boating, glacier climbing. Just as psychologists often say, screaming and releasing emotions during extreme sports, feeling the pure rush of dopamine, was one of the most effective ways to let go. The heaviness she had carried for so long finally lifted. Her mood improved visibly day by day. She felt so good that when Jonathan eventually called her, she even answered the phone with a smile. On the other end, his tone was as blunt as ever. "Olivia, if you didn't want Tara to move in, you could have just said so. What's with dismantling the bed in the master bedroom? Do you know that because of your childish stunt, we came back today and had nowhere to sleep?" He paused briefly, then added, "I don't have time to argue with you. Give Tara that amethyst necklace I gave you on our first anniversary and I'll let this go." "Oh, that thing?" Standing by a lake on New Zealand's South Island, with the wind carrying the scent of grass, Olivia stopped walking and answered casually. "I probably lost it when I moved. There was too much stuff." "You moved out?" Jonathan's voice jumped several octaves in shock. "Wait, how could you lose it? Do you know that do you mean the one you spent $5 million bidding for at auction? The one you had engraved with both our names by some old master craftsman in Russia so it would be a surprise?" Olivia imitated his indignant tone and laughed coldly. "Honestly, those things you used to give me, I couldn't even stand looking at them. And when I moved, more than just that necklace went missing. So why make such a big deal out of a mere piece of crystal?" On the other end of the line, loud crashing sounds echoed one after another. Jonathan was breathing heavily, his voice full of rage. "Olivia, you're unbelievable. Let me tell you something, with that attitude, don't expect me to ever say another kind word to you in this lifetime." Who the hell wants your kind words?" Olivia cut him off sharply. "Jonathan, I'll tell you this right now. Last time at the hospital I let you and that cheap little mistress off the hook because we were in public. If you dare bring Tara to bother me again, I'll smash both your heads in together." Then she hung up immediately. Her phone buzzed repeatedly as messages poured in. She didn't even open them. Instead, she simply blocked Jonathan's number. Good. Now he finally understood what it felt like to be consumed by anger, just like she had been all those years. 3 months passed quickly. After traveling through a few more countries and finally clearing her mind, Olivia boarded a plane back to New York once the lawyers informed her that the asset settlement was finally complete. After landing, she dragged her suitcase straight to a mall in Midtown. That evening was Jane's annual birthday party. Olivia had already reserved Jane's gift long ago and only needed to pick it up now that she was back in town. It was an antique violin. Jane had recently become obsessed with classical music and insisted she wanted to learn. A familiar sales associate brought her tea and pastries, explaining that an employee had already gone to the storage room to pack the item. But less than 5 minutes later, the associate returned, looking uneasy. "I'm very sorry, Ms. Olivia. The system shows that another customer used special connections to take over the reservation you had originally secured." Olivia looked up in surprise. Not far away, Tara, dressed head to toe in Chanel, walked toward her arm in arm with Jonathan. Ah, so this was aimed at her. She had barely stood up when Jonathan stepped forward first, pulling Tara behind him. "If you want to lose your temper, take it out on me. Don't bully a young girl." Tara's eyes immediately reddened. "Jonathan, I don't want you always standing in front of me like a fool. I've grown up now. This time it's my turn to protect you." She pushed him aside and walked up to Olivia with her chin lifted. "Mrs. Jonathan, I know the violin today was meant to be your friend's birthday gift. If you let Jonathan go and bless our relationship, I might consider letting you have it. She smiled confidently. Honestly, there's nothing particularly special about you, is there? If I had been the one who went through hardship with him back then, I'd be the one sitting in your position today. Olivia glanced at the time and resisted the urge to slap her. Who do you think you are, negotiating with me? She pulled out her phone and made a quick call. Less than a minute later, the sales associate hurried back again. I'm terribly sorry, Ms. Olivia. There was a mistake on our end. As compensation, the manager will personally deliver the violin to the address you provided. Olivia spread her hands toward Tara, whose face had turned red with anger. As you can see, I don't have any special talents. I just happen to know a few people who can make this store, no, this entire mall, refuse service to you from now on. Olivia, that's going too far. Jonathan's expression darkened. Olivia rolled her wrists casually and walked toward him. His body instantly tensed, suspicion filling the lines between his brows, as if he were certain she was about to explode the way she always had before. But this time she simply pulled out a stack of documents she had prepared in advance. Let's get a divorce, Jonathan. I really don't have the patience to end up in the hospital with you for the 8th time. When he remained silent, she stuffed the papers into his hands. I've also included the asset division agreement behind the divorce papers. Take a look when you have time. You can rest assured it's fair. I consulted 5 lawyers to make sure of it. Jonathan remained frozen. His eyes were empty, as though his soul had been pulled out of him. Not wanting to be late for Jane's party, Olivia waved her hand politely, but perfunctorily, in front of his face. When he still didn't respond, she lost patience and turned to leave. Behind her, Tara let out an uncontrollable squeal of delight. The sound irritated Olivia, and she quickened her pace, only for someone to suddenly grab her wrist. Jonathan had chased after her without her noticing. Olivia, he stared at her intensely, his eyes bloodshot, his breathing shaking violently. It was you. You were the one who betrayed me first. And now you're just casually asking for a divorce. I won't agree. His state was unsettling. Olivia shook his hand off and instinctively stepped back. I don't understand what you're talking about. Watching his expression carefully, she softened her tone, trying to calm him. I know after years of fighting like enemies, suddenly bringing up divorce might be hard for you to accept. But you already have Tara now. You should be putting her feelings first. Why waste time arguing with me? If you're upset, go home and think it over. I've already moved out anyway. That house belongs entirely to you and Tara now. When you've thought it through, just sign the papers and call me to finalize the process. Then we can each go our separate ways, free and happy. Free and happy? Jonathan repeated. His expression twisted as if he had just heard the biggest joke in the world. Why is it that I'm the one who's been trapped and tortured all these years, while you can say something so cruel without even blinking? He pulled out his phone and threw it in front of her. Pointing at his chest, he practically roared, "Take a good look at the disgusting thing you did. While I was working myself to death for the New York headquarters, you sold yourself for a few lousy dollars. Olivia, tell me honestly, how could you do that to me?" Olivia silently bent down and picked up the phone. On the screen was a video. In it, she was lying on a bed while someone tore at her clothes. The clip was only about 10 seconds long, but it clearly showed both her face and the man's. The man pinning her down was someone both she and Jonathan knew very well. In that instant, everything suddenly made sense. No wonder Jonathan had seemed like a completely different person all these years. No wonder he deliberately brought his mistresses home even though he knew it would enrage her. It had all been a long, calculated revenge. Olivia's eyes reddened as she looked up at him, disappointment filling every word she spoke. Jonathan, anyone in the world can call me dirty. But you can't. 7 years ago, when their company was growing faster than ever, Jonathan received news that his biological father had died. He wanted to take advantage of the chaos within the family to dismantle things from the inside and reclaim what had always belonged to him. To obtain the capital he needed, he secretly signed a massive high-risk betting agreement with an investment firm that had previously shown interest in acquiring their company, without telling Olivia. Trying to grab profit from capital like that was practically like stealing meat from a tiger's mouth. It wasn't until 2 consecutive quarters of massive losses, and suspicious coincidences among suppliers, that Jonathan finally realized he had fallen into a carefully prepared trap. When he confessed everything to Olivia, she felt something close to complete despair. That night she even searched online which building in New York would guarantee instant death if she jumped. But after breaking down, she still chose to keep going. Jonathan was still so young. She couldn't watch him go to prison. Just when they were at their most desperate, a turning point appeared. A woman named Shelley approached Olivia and asked if she wanted to set up a plan together. Through their conversation, Olivia learned Shelley was actually the wife of the investment firm's owner. Shelley's goal was simple. If her husband wanted to elevate his mistress and throw her aside, she would not only kick him out, she would make sure he walked away with nothing. If Olivia cooperated with her plan, Shelley promised that once everything was done, the betting agreement would be cancelled. She would also provide evidence of her husband's tax evasion and money laundering, ensuring he could never recover. Olivia agreed almost immediately, even when Shelley urged her to reconsider. At the time, Shelley leaned back with a cigarette and spoke slowly. Olivia, speaking from experience, I have to warn you. My husband and I were childhood sweethearts too, yet we still ended up like this. Men are the easiest creatures to fail a test. You're sacrificing so much for Jonathan right now. I doubt it's worth it. Olivia replied simply, he'll believe me. She believed Jonathan would never doubt her character. Even if someday he saw the video, he would listen to her explanation. Shelley didn't argue further. She only left her with one meaningful sentence, then keep some evidence. You might need it someday. No one expected that those words would become a prophecy. Olivia opened an encrypted folder on her phone and sent Jonathan the chat records with Shelley along with the full video from that year. When she spoke again, her voice sounded tired. Jonathan, I don't know who sent you that clip, but if you watch the full version, you'll see that the moment the second button on my shirt was undone, the FBI had already kicked down the door. Jonathan stared at the screen, his pupils trembling violently. Olivia watched his face slowly turn pale and sighed softly. No matter how you try to interpret it, the facts are right there. Back then, nothing actually happened between me and that man. Just then, a shrill ringtone cut through the silence. It was Jane calling. Olivia answered as she turned and began walking toward the exit. All right, Your Highness. I'm on my way now. I'll be there in 10 minutes. But Jonathan rushed forward and tried to stop her. Olivia, you can't leave. His face was full of unwillingness. Why didn't you just tell me all this earlier? If you'd told me sooner, things wouldn't have turned out like this. Olivia stopped. That's because I loved you so much back then. She looked at him with undisguised disgust. Because I loved you, I didn't think what I did was some great sacrifice. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel guilty. In my eyes, I simply did what was right at a moment when I had no other choice. That's all. She paused, her voice turning colder. Instead of questioning me, maybe you should ask yourself why, when you received that video, you didn't come to me immediately to confirm the truth. Instead, you chose to drown in your anger and spent 6 years getting revenge on me in the most disgusting ways possible. Jonathan, you are the one who turned things into this. With that, she shoved him aside and walked away without looking back. Behind her, Jonathan collapsed onto the ground in a miserable heap. His eyes were unfocused, as though every ounce of strength had drained from his body. Olivia did make it to Jane's birthday party. 2 days earlier, Jane had just dumped her boyfriend of 3 years, a younger guy she had been dating. Jane had always been a bit of a playgirl. Staying with one person for 3 years was already her limit. To celebrate being single again, she hired over a dozen male models and threw a wild party at home. While they were cutting the cake, Olivia told Jane about Jonathan's misunderstanding. Jane exploded instantly, spending half an hour loudly calling him a stupid asshole. After venting, she gulped down some wine and asked with lingering concern, if he shows up crying, kneeling, slapping himself and begging you to forgive him, you're not going to lose your mind and take him back, right? Olivia smiled and shook her head. Don't worry. My reaction would be the same as yours. Just earlier that evening, Jane's ex-boyfriend had suddenly shown up at the party. The moment he saw her, he started crying, insisting he'd been wrongly accused and clinging to her leg begging for another chance. Before he could finish, Jane grabbed his freshly curled hair and started slapping him left and right. You're innocent? I've got surveillance footage of you practically glued to that woman and you still claim she's the cleaning lady? I used to overlook things because you were at least decent in bed, but now you've got the nerve to bring her into my house? Today's my birthday and you're already bad luck, now you show up to make things worse? If I don't kick you into next week, I'm not worthy of the name Jane. Watching the young man crawl away in panic, Olivia couldn't help thinking, never mess with a woman who had idolized gangster movies since the age of 3. Satisfied by Olivia's answer, Jane relaxed and waved for a few male models to come over and pop champagne. As a seasoned connoisseur of attractive men, Jane's taste was undeniable. With just one glance from her, the models instantly understood, biting their lips, pouring champagne over themselves, and swaying their hips as they danced. Beauty could be dangerously distracting. Before long, Olivia and Jane were completely drunk. The chaos finally ended the next evening when Olivia drove home. The moment she saw the figure crouching by her front door, Olivia frowned. She tried to walk past him toward the entrance, but Jonathan woke at the sound of her footsteps and sprang to his feet. "You're finally back." He looked at her with eager excitement and held out a small box like a treasure. "Look, I found the amethyst necklace that got lost. One of the clasps was missing, but I had someone repair it." Olivia easily stepped aside, avoiding the hand holding the box. It hung awkwardly in midair. "Jonathan," she said flatly, "since we're both already 30, maybe it's time to stop acting like you're still 25. She looked at him expressionlessly. "Whatever you came here for today, I'll repeat this one more time. My decision to divorce you will not change. Olivia, can you please not treat me like this?" Jonathan swayed slightly, pain etched across his face. "Yes, the video incident was my fault. I wronged you. Hit me if you want, just like before. However you want. I won't fight back this time." His voice broke. "No matter what, please give me a chance to make it up to you. As long as you're willing to forgive, cut the bullshit." Olivia finally lost control. She grabbed her bag and swung it at his head with all her strength. "You think you deserve forgiveness?" Her voice shook with rage. "When you first started cheating, I was so heartbroken I couldn't sleep all night. I had to rely on sleeping pills just to get 2 hours of rest. Every day I kept wondering what I'd done wrong to make you chase excitement with other women. Later, when you kept bringing those mistresses home, I couldn't stand how I always lost control and fought with you. I went to see a psychologist and found out I'd developed bipolar disorder. To cope with my emotions, I cut myself with over a dozen different knives. The sharpest one is still in the nightstand in the old villa." Her eyes were blazing. "All these years the stress made me sick. I've had 3 breast cyst surgeries. The worst time, the doctor said if we'd discovered it 2 months later it would have turned into cancer." She stopped, letting out a bitter laugh. "Jonathan, all of this is because of you. Where do you get the nerve to ask for my forgiveness?" Jonathan clutched his chest and leaned against the wall, his lips trembling violently. "I'm sorry, Olivia. I'm sorry." His eyes fixed on the scars on her wrist as tears streamed down his face. "Believe me, I never meant to hurt you like this. I truly didn't know about any of this." "Of course you didn't," Olivia said quietly. "Because at those times, you were busy sleeping with someone else." She looked at him calmly. "Jonathan, do you know something? Compared to believing that I slept with another man, I'd honestly rather you had just cheated from the start. But when I was already completely dead inside, you suddenly tell me that this disgusting mess was all caused by a misunderstanding." She shook her head slowly. "Trying to cover your guilt like this makes everything I sacrificed feel like a complete joke." Jonathan's shoulders shook. His mouth opened as if he wanted to speak, but no words came out. After all these years together, he understood perfectly. When she spoke like this, it meant she would never give him another chance. Olivia pushed him aside and unlocked the door with her fingerprint. "Jonathan, if you're still a man at all, sign the divorce papers properly. Otherwise, I'll truly despise you." She had no intention of resolving things with violence anymore. Even touching him made her feel reflexively disgusted. The door slammed shut. No chance left for him to beg. It wasn't until the next morning that Jonathan finally left. Cigarette butts littered the ground outside the door. But it was clear he hadn't given up so easily. For the entire week that followed, rain or shine, every time Olivia left the house she would see him standing under the streetlight, smoking. As if silently watching her like that was some form of penance. One night at 2 a.m., Olivia woke up thirsty and went to the kitchen for water. Passing the living room balcony, she noticed he was still there. The thin figure looked up toward her apartment, the faint orange glow of a cigarette burning between his fingers. She didn't know what he thought this would accomplish. All she knew was that his presence had begun to disturb her life again. Eventually, just to avoid seeing him, she stopped opening the balcony curtains altogether. But Olivia wasn't without options. She snapped a photo and sent it to Tara with a short message, "Come pick up the trash, I don't want any more." Olivia believed Tara probably did have some feelings for Jonathan. But what had really kept her waiting patiently for so long was almost certainly her desire for money and status. Now that she finally had a chance to replace the wife, there was no way she'd let it slip away. Sure enough, less than half an hour later, a tall, curvy figure appeared downstairs. Olivia watched from her window. She didn't know exactly what Tara said or did, but she saw Jonathan go from angrily shouting, to freezing in place, to slowly losing all resistance under Tara's teasing. In the end, he shoved Tara against the hood of the car, completely losing control, moving against her again and again. The next morning, the internet exploded. Crystal clear photos of Jonathan and Tara, faces fully visible, completely absorbed in the moment, covered every major news site. Desperate mistress delivers herself across the country. CEO caught cheating in an alley behind wife's back. Overnight, Jonathan's reputation collapsed. His family, furious about the public scandal, removed him entirely from the family trust and board of directors. Tara was fired from the company for misconduct and quietly blacklisted across the industry. On the day they finalized the divorce, Jonathan was still rambling endlessly, trying to explain. "I really didn't mean to touch Tara. It just happened." Olivia accepted the thin divorce certificate from the clerk and walked toward the exit, nodding lightly. "I know," she said. Then she looked at him and smiled. "Because I planned all of it." The reporters had been arranged in advance. The advertisement for the aphrodisiac drug? She had someone send it to Tara's phone. Tara wanted to push her out and take her place. So Olivia made sure Jonathan ended up leaving with nothing, leaving Tara with nothing as well. Turning the situation to her advantage, using someone's own scheme against them. It was the same lesson Shelley had once passed on to her. Snowflakes began to drift down from the sky. Jonathan stopped walking. The light in his eyes vanished instantly. "Olivia, how could you do this to me?" He stared at her blankly as tears slid down the corners of his eyes. "Do you know? I was diagnosed with liver cancer yesterday. The doctor said, it's already late stage." "Oh? Is that so?" Olivia looked at his pale face and offered a perfectly sincere response. "Well, that's wonderful news. Then hurry up and die." Jonathan gasped for air, his chest heaving violently. "Why?" he muttered, staring at her. "I'm dying, and you still refuse to forgive me. Why?" Just then, a voice interrupted. "Why what?" A tall young man, at least 6'3", stepped forward and looked down at Jonathan. "Olivia's too beautiful for someone like you. Have you looked in the mirror lately, old man?" He held a bouquet of roses and turned to Olivia with a playful smile. "Hey, you promised we'd go see a movie tonight. Let's ignore this guy, okay?" Olivia smiled. "Okay." The snow began falling harder. She took the young man's hand, ignored Jonathan's completely shattered expression, and got into the car. As the car started, the wind and snow howled behind them, growing fainter and fainter. It was impossible to tell whether the sound fading into the distance was the wind, or Jonathan crying. There were still many things left unsaid. For example, Olivia and Jane had started a model management agency together. The young man was simply a new model they had recently signed. And as for that question, about the answer she had once searched for, it had never really changed. But from the moment she turned away, none of it needed explaining anymore. From now on, the name Jonathan would have nothing to do with her life. No attention. No concern. Just moving forward. And slowly, peacefully, forgetting everything. That was the most dignified ending she could give to that relationship. And that's the end of the story. Many people ask, when a relationship reaches its end, what is the right way to walk away? Should it be furious accusations? Endless arguments? Or something like Olivia did, setting up a carefully planned trap that destroys the other person? But Olivia's final words already gave the answer. She said, stop paying attention. Stop caring. Move forward. And forget everything calmly. That's the most dignified ending. Everything she arranged wasn't really about revenge. It was about drawing a full stop. That full stop wasn't meant for Jonathan. It was meant for herself. It took her 6 years to grow from someone controlled by her emotions into someone who could take control of her own life. She learned how to stay clear-headed in anger, how to gather strength in pain, how to find a way out in despair. Marriage is never the end of life. It's only part of the journey. Some people walk with you for a short stretch. Some walk with you for a lifetime. But no matter how far the road goes, the only person who will truly walk with you until the end is yourself. So if you're currently trapped in a relationship that's draining you, ask yourself one question: is this relationship nourishing you or consuming you? If it's the latter, then have the courage to turn around and leave. Don't be afraid. The world is big. The scenery is beautiful. And you deserve a better life. Thank you for watching this episode of Marriage is Not the End. If you enjoyed the story, please like, subscribe, and share. See you next time.